The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Susan Sparks. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about her, but her bio is so long and so interesting. If I told you everything that she is all about, you'd be here for another 15 minutes. So I'm just going to make it very simple, and then I'm going to ask her a number of questions. So my guest today is Susan Sparks. As a trial lawyer, she turned up doing stand-up comedy and is a Baptist minister. What a combination, Susan. Now, she's she's the only female comedian with a pulpit, and that is extremely interesting. Now, currently, she's the senior pastor of the historic Madison Avenue Baptist Church in New York City and the first woman pastor in its 170-year history. That is fascinating. Now, Susan's work is very, very exciting because she does humor, she does healing and spirituality, and has been featured on some of the most interesting television stations, such as ABC, CNN, CBS, and the History Channel. Let's introduce her again and say to you, Susan, as a TEDx speaker and a professional comedian, what kind of tours do you do? And I heard that you've done things with a rabbi and a Muslim, and that's kind of funny to actually, because it's called the Laugh in Peace Tour. Tell us about that, if you will.
Sure. And Susan, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited to be a part. I am so excited to be touring with, as you said, the Laugh in Peace Tour. It was started by Rabbi Bob Alper back right after 9/11. And his whole goal was to put conversations about culture and some religion, but more just the things that we find difficult to talk about, to deal with, but put them in conversation through the lens of humor. And so the three of us are on stage, and we're not proselytizing. We're not talking about our religion so much as we are just talking about our everyday lives and what we have in common. Like Bob sometimes ends the show with this story, and I love it so much, especially if you keep in mind it's a rabbi telling this story. Mm-hmm. He said, we all have more in common than we think. We all have more in common than we think. For example, he said there were two rabbis talking. One said to the other, my son converted to Christianity. What should I do? And the second rabbi said, my son too. Whoa. And they said, what should we do? And they said, let's talk to God. So they go to God and they say, both of our sons have converted to Christianity. What should we do? And God says, really? My son too. And for coming from a rabbi, it's not me talking about, the Christianity versus Judaism. It's a rabbi just saying, look, what we have in common as opposed to what we have in difference. So, yeah, it's a really wonderful tour. We're getting ready to go to Knoxville, Tennessee, and then we're headed down to Atlanta, Georgia, and we've been all over the country and internationally as well. So it's a great blessing and honor for me.
Now, how did you actually develop a career as a minister and a comedian? Because, as I said from the beginning, that is very unusual. And not only is it unusual, it is the kind of thing that is actually needed. But today, in our world, I think people's lost their sense of humor. And you actually deal with that, and you put it into your sermon. So I want to know, how did you develop that?
Well, that's a great question, Susan. And this is a 3-hour podcast, right? Is that?
We'll do other podcasts together. Let's keep it at 30 minutes if we can.
I'll keep it short. No, I actually wanted to be a preacher when I was a little girl, and I grew up basically a funny little kid who wanted to be a preacher. But the world tried to beat it out of me, and my story in life really is about fighting to get it back, which is really everybody's story in a way, fighting to keep that authentic voice, that authentic self. And like I said, it was really the church that kind of beat it out of me. I grew up in a very conservative tradition, Southern Baptist, and they told me at an early age women can't be ordained, women can't be ministers. So I thought, all right, fine. Who's going to fight that battle at 6 years old? And, fast forward down the road, I find myself, I'm a trial lawyer, which honestly, Susan, is the same job. It's just different clients. You're persuading, you're taking care of people, you're protecting your clients, your congregation, whatever. So I'm a trial lawyer, but yet I've got this sort of spiritual underpinning and this funny little kid still there. So I find myself studying stand-up as a lawyer. And, doing a lot of creative work. And, the one quick story, one night I found myself, I'm doing trials during the day. And yet at night I go to these smoky country bars and I'm singing country music and doing stand-up comedy. Neither world knew about the other, and honestly, the law career wasn't going so well because the juries, I was very uptight and very worried about matching nouns and perfect verbs and looking all, getting all the suit and the whole bit. So one night I'm at this bar singing my music, doing my stand-up, and I look out in the audience, and there is the managing partner of my law firm. And I'm like, oh, no, I just bought a house. I'm going to get bankrupt. And he came up to me, and he said, where's that woman on stage? She'd make a great trial lawyer. And it seems like such a simple thing, but the bottom line, that was the turning point for me. I realized that in order to really grasp life for all of its gifts, you've got to bring all of who you are to what you do. And so that was the moment that I really started circling back to, I should start thinking about seminary, and I should bring all of this in, the comedy, the music, the arts, the creativity. And, there's not a job title out there for me now, but I'm just going to have to blaze a trail and make one.
There you go. I have a story for you, Susan, and you're going to laugh because this really is funny. And you were talking about meeting your boss at a bar, in a sense, and years and years ago, there was a movie that came out. It was a little bit of a pornographic movie, but it was very popular, and everybody was going to it. And my husband and I decided that, why not? I mean, everybody's going. There must be something good about it. So I go inside, and sure enough, who do I see? I see my boss, who was a conservative, very, very, when I say conservative, she was the right to the right to the right, and there she is in a pornographic movie. So I look at her, and I decide that I don't want her to see me there, so I kind of pass, and there she is looking straight at me, and we sort of waved, and it was really funny. But
that's great.
Yeah, it was really great. And so let's talk about humor and religion. And I want to know, and I'm sure our audience wants to know what that has in common, because humor and religion, doesn't seem like it's a real common thing, but you're doing it. So why?
Right.
And what?
Well, when people ask me what I do, you're absolutely right, Susan, because I'll say, well, I'm a minister and I'm a stand-up. And their first reaction is, what? And then they stop and go, why? And it's so interesting to me that people still just don't see that connection. And to me, it is about really holistic worship. It is about bringing, again, all of who we are to the altar, to God. Because, God can't heal us unless we bring all the pieces. And everything about us, whether it's the anger, the resentment, the shame, or the laughter and the joy, it's all holy. So we have to bring all of it in the door with us as we approach the holy and bring ourselves in a holistic manner. The book of Ecclesiastes says there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. And honestly, we have erred way too hard on the actual weeping side. I can speak from a Christian standpoint. It blows my mind because the word gospel means good news. And somewhere, Susan, I think we've sort of lost that. Everything is, the church is all about judgment and shame. It's not about joy and hope, which is the essence of the message. And that's what I'm really trying to reframe. It brings the gifts of forgiveness, of perspective, of hope. And, the bottom line is this. This is what I've always said. If you can laugh at yourself, you can forgive yourself. And if you can forgive yourself, you can forgive others. And that, to me, is it in a nutshell. It brings that forgiveness and that new perspective, that empathy, that love towards others, that understanding that sometimes we just can't get through any other way.
Yeah. That should be the holy grail, where you say to people, you say, look, I am a religious person, and I have a church that I belong to, that I do talks, and I want to see people laughing, because is there anything better than humor?
Right. No.
Now.
No, you're
That's
talking
right.
preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, I hear you. Now,
you look at how Jesus preached. Many of his messages were hilarious and funny, especially to the context of his audience at the time, because he preached about familiar things, funny things, the juxtaposition of unexpected ideas.
Yeah. What do you attribute to the fact that, in fact, the millenniums are probably the worst when it comes to humor, because they're so busy, they're so desirous of making money and having power and being on this digital network that everybody is, by their phone every day, by the computer every day, and they lost it. They lost it. Why? What do you attribute that to?
Lost their ability to laugh, you mean?
To laugh and to make jokes and to have a little bit of a good sense of humor.
I don't know. I'm not. I'm not sure how to answer that question, because I think it's them, but it's most everybody right now. And honestly, Susan, I attribute it to the nature of the world in which we live. Every morning, this, your listeners know this. You flip on the TV, or you open the paper, or you turn on your computer, to read something digital, and every single thing is about a tragedy, or people screaming at each other, or people cutting someone down, or corrosive words, or, anger. And I don't know how you can live in an environment like that and not slowly but surely absorb it. And I think it's the nature of our times right now that this is so needed. It is, we forget who we are. We forget the gifts we've been given, because we are, it's like we are swimming in this stuff and we can't get away from it. So that's my little, I hope one bit at a time. I hope to leave the world a little better place, just one smile at a time. You're doing it through your radio show, and people take other ways of doing it, but we have to chisel away at it.
There you go. Now, you're a trial lawyer as well. You must have a story of somebody who you actually was, what should I say? You worked for them, and there was some humor that came out of that. I'm just curious if that ever happened, where you had a dead.
Yeah. My immediate thought was the kind of P.S. after the story I told you about the trial lawyer, my boss at the bar, after he said that to me, and I thought, well, you know what? I really do need to be bringing all of who I am, bringing the humor, bringing the arts into it. The next jury trial that I did, I thought, all right, let's try it. And it was a fraud case, and I was defending a company who's one of their employees had defrauded the company, and I got up in front of the jury, very rural town in southern Georgia, and I got up and I said, so, I sing country music. Do y'all like country music? In the heaviest accent I could put on. All of us, heads are nodding. Oh, yeah, leaning in. And I said, well, this case reminds me of a song by Patsy Cline. It's called Crazy. Maybe y'all know that. And I started singing a couple of bars of the song. Well, the judge was like, order. I tell you what, that jury remembered it, and they latched onto it, and they also, in that moment, there's immediate trust, rapport, intimacy, because we've laughed together, and it was something they could hear. So it was the power of that I was like, oh my gosh, she was right. But it was a pretty funny moment.
Now, where did you, your favorite sermon that you've given, what is it? Is there a specific one that you love?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I have to say, probably there was one about 5 years ago. I was in Memphis, Tennessee with my husband, Toby. We were walking along, and someone had spray painted on a road sign, "Trust Jesus and Elvis." And I just thought that was so funny. So I came home, and it was right before Easter. So I wrote an Easter sermon, of all things, with that title. And it basically, the subtitle was "The King Lives." And the whole sermon was about how Christians needed to be more like Elvis fans, because Elvis fans believe the King lives. And
that's right.
And I did.
And don't you? Come on.
Yeah.
Be honest with us.
I know, but I love it. It was really fun, and it was fun, but it also had a hook and a real message that people remembered and took away. So, yeah, I love that. I loved that sermon.
Oh, that's great. And let's talk about your book. I really want to know a little bit about it because listening to you and hearing what you have to say about all of the things that you do make me realize that you've probably written such a book because you have so much material that how could you not write a book? And tell the audience about it.
Okay. Well, I've actually got 3, and I have one that's coming out in June, but let me give you a quick blurb on the first 2. The first one was called Laugh Your Way to Grace, and it's a part memoir, part self-help about the power of humor in life, work, and the spiritual path. And that's kind of that's my work that is why I do what I do. And that book, it came out in 2010, was named the best spiritual book. Oprah picked it up. It was a real, it's a beautiful little book, and I still to this day love that thing to death. The second one is a book that came out last year called Preaching Punchlines, and it's about how the power of stand-up comedy helps us transform our communication. And it was specifically written for preachers, but anybody can get tools and useful information out of it. The one that's coming out in June, I'm so excited about. It is called Miracle on 31st Street. Our church is on 31st Street. You know, it's a takeoff on the Miracle on 34th Street movie. But it is a collection of holiday meditations that are meant to be evergreen throughout the year. And the book is entitled Miracle on 31st Street, Christmas Cheer Every Day of the Year, Grinch to Gratitude in 26 Days. The newest book that's coming out in June, I am so excited about. It is called Miracle on 31st Street. It's my church is on 31st Street here in Manhattan, and so it's a takeoff on the movie title, Miracle on 34th. It's a collection of holiday Christmas meditations that's meant to be evergreen. So it's launching in June to try to catch folks for the Christmas in July celebration, which a lot of people do, but it's meant anytime. And there's literally 26 little meditations, and there's a free workbook and journal that goes with it, as well as an online Advent calendar. So you spend a few minutes every day with each meditation that goes through everything from stress to negativity to finding, to learning how to reclaim time, to learning how to see miracles in everyday life. And the book title basically tells what happens, because the book is Miracle on 31st Street, Christmas Cheer Every Day of the Year, Grinch to Gratitude in 26 Days. And so it's a time you could just call, happiness is not a once-a-year event. And this is the book that you can reach out to whenever you need to reclaim some joy and the world is beating you down. And I'm very excited. Yeah. It's going to be on Amazon starting on June 7th.
Well, you know something, I was going to ask you the question, and it's very appropriate now that you've mentioned your book, and that is, what do you attribute to the fact that people are so negative? You travel with a rabbi and you travel with a Muslim, and you know the way people feel about Muslims and the way they stereotype them. Now, I am curious to know if you can turn that into a funny story, because you know what? People, as I said before, people are so negative. You walk around, they say, oh, the world is coming apart. This virus we have coming now is going to be the end of the world. There is that kind of statements going on all over the place. I'm curious how Reverend Susan Sparks, would answer that.
Well, I think you nailed it, Susan, when you said the stereotypes. It's the consistent negativity and stereotypes. One of the comedians that I worked with in the past, Muslim comedians, his name is Mo Amer, A-M-E-R. Mo broke big a couple of years ago. He's now on Colbert. He has a Netflix special. But he tells a story that I think goes right to what you're talking about. He talks about immigration, and he talks about being a refugee himself. He was raised in Skokie, Illinois. He tells a story about being at a stoplight, and these two guys roll up in a pickup truck. Now, Mo is dark-skinned, long beard. A lot of that plays into the stereotypes that people love to throw around on the news. But here's Mo sitting in a light. Guy rolls down the window and yells, "What's up, Osama?" Then his friend leans out the window and goes, "What's going on, Gandhi?" Mo is, he talks about this in his stand-up routine, and he's like, let's just pause for a minute and absorb that. He said, I'm being simultaneously called Osama bin Laden and Gandhi. He said, what does that even mean? Like, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to yell, I'm going to yell, I'm going to kill you by not eating. What does that mean? It's the most ridiculous thing, and it's almost like taking the stereotypes to their absolute ridiculous conclusions and throwing it back in people's faces. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about absolute baseless, ignorant stereotypes that when you put a light on them, they're hilarious because they're hilarious and tragic, but you can't help but laugh because they're so ridiculous.
I know. I was at a TEDx event, a few months ago, and you know who was speaking? The granddaughter of Mrs. Gandhi. And when she talked, the audience stood up and clapped because she talked about the fact that her grandfather did everything peacefully. And he had such an effect on the public. Everybody stood and they laughed, and they also said, this man understands. And I can't even tell you how exciting it was and how emotional it was because you remember, we had Martin Luther King, no violence. We had Gandhi, no violence. Who else can we mention that was all about no violence? And they had to have a sense of humor because, needless to say, there were people who said, oh, God, who wants to hear what they have to say? So, it was an interesting kind of thing. Now, one more time, I want to understand, do you still do your stand-up? Because it sounds fantastic. And I'm sure with all the things that you do, I don't know if you have time to do that.
Oh, yeah. I'm headed to Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm going to preach a sermon on Sunday morning. I'm getting on a plane. I'm going to Knoxville, Tennessee. And Bob and Jabran Salim, who is our new Muslim comic, we have a show on Monday in Knoxville. Then we are flying to Atlanta, Georgia 2 weeks later. So we are actively doing it. I'm also doing a 4-day speaking event in Knoxville for about 150 pastors across the country about the power of humor in life, work, worship, preaching, and self-care. So I'm just so blessed, Susan. I have this incredible church that I am able to work at, but also have the freedom. They see this as an extension of their ministry to be able to go out and do this stand up and do the comedy and share joy with people.
Susan, I would love for people to be able to get in touch with you, to learn a little bit more about you, to buy your books, to do everything that you said that you can do is, using your sense of humor. So how do they get in touch with you, and how do they get your books?
That'd be great. Thank you, Susan. My website is susansparks.com. Pretty simple. And everything that you might want to access is on there. We live stream all of our sermons, so you can access there. Their podcasts, they're accessed there. My YouTube channel, where you can see videos and different films that I've put out. Also, I have a newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks that is based on a column that I write. That's free, obviously. You can get that on the website. And the books are on the website as well. The new one that's coming out in June is not up yet because the cover is still being finalized, but it should be up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So just go to susansparks.com and please reach out and say hello.
Well, that's terrific. My guest today has been Susan Sparks. She's a trial lawyer turned stand-up comedian and a Baptist minister, and boy, does she know her stuff. So I want everybody to look for her book because, as she said, a little piece of humor really goes a long way. And I thought, listening to her, it kind of gets me to want to say, oh, Susan, it was a delightful conversation that I had with you, and thank you for being on my show.
Well, Susan, it was my honor. Thank you.